So apologies to anyone about to eat their dinner, but we're going to talk about a man from South Tyneside, and he's been charged with some really very disturbing and strange crimes. So it's alleged that he was, among other things, dumping soiled adult nappies at nurseries. Now, the reason we want to talk about this story is because much of the media have decided to describe him as a woman. He calls himself Abby Taylor, and Sky News and other outlets have gone along with this. Local newspaper have described him as a South Shields woman. Even the sort of anti-woke Daily Mail have given him she, her pronouns. I mean, Joe, what do you make of this bizarre trend? I mean, isn't the point of journalism to tell the truth and to report the facts as they are? And anyone who can see the picture of this man can see it's a man.
Absolutely. I mean, what this really is deference to perverts. You know, why should we go around kind of doffing the cap, if you like, to the feelings of these male perverts? I can think of no other word for it. You know, so there've been, this is not the first case, obviously. There's been numerous cases of these men who fancy themselves as women, you know, who make don't even go so far as to make the effort to shave, you know, and commit these gross acts of sexual indecency, and yet then get treated as if their feelings, how they like to be called, the pronouns they prefer to use, is suddenly what's all important. You know, I think there is a bit of misinformation, to go back to the previous discussion, about kind of what the law is in this instance, or, you know, what the press regulatory authorities expect. You almost get the impression that some media outlets think that the law says that they have to refer to men who commit these offences as women if that's their preferred pronouns. But as far as I'm aware, there's no law in the land that says that you have to legally respect in print and in media reporting as somebody's preferred pronouns. I think you're absolutely right, Fraser. The only moral commitment that journalists should have is to tell the truth. And if somebody's a man, then you have a moral responsibility, I think, to use male pronouns and actually say the truth as you see fit. I mean, it kind of creates all kinds of horrible situations where kind of statistically it makes it appear as if women are committing more sex crimes than they actually are. But I think for me the worst possible examples of this is where some of these cases have actually gone to court, and women victims have actually been made to stand up in court and refer to their attacker as she, you know, her penis. And for me, that's where this is morally reprehensible, to actually make a woman who's been a victim of one of these crimes lie about the person who attacked her. I think is just really disgusting.
Definitely. Tom?
No, I think it's just one of the great contradictions of journalism at the moment, which is there is all this panic about misinformation and fact-checking, and the idea that everything is so post-truth that, you know, everyone's just making their own reality, talking all this nonsense and pretending like it's actually true. And yet, time and again, outlets across the political spectrum genuflect to this ideology and treat the seeming self-ID of really quite depraved individuals as if it's holy writ. And it's to the point where you've got a headline and an image which so clearly contradict one another in terms of describing this gentleman as a woman. And also just the types of crimes. These are crimes that are, you know, the vast majority of these kinds of things are committed by men. We all know that. That's statistically the case. So insult to people's intelligence doesn't really capture it. It is deranging. It is, you know, people must think what the hell is going on. And there's been a string of cases like this, as Joe was saying. Often it's cases of paedophiles or rapists and so on, where they've just been presented in a news article as woman does X or woman does Y. There's one from a few years ago which kind of was on a par with this one, which was woman jailed for having cocaine-fueled sex with an Alsatian, accompanied by a picture of a bloke with stubble in a wig. You just think, you're the journalist writing that piece and putting it together. You know that what you're saying is absolutely absurd, and yet people feel compelled to do it anyway. And it's that bit, why they feel so compelled to do it anyway, which I find so bemusing but also fascinating.
But I suppose, I mean, that is a requirement of trans ideology, right? Because if you believe in self-ID, then how could anyone be lying? You must agree to, you know, what someone says there is their truth.
Absolutely. And I mean, this was very well illustrated in the Scottish case of Isla Bryson, which just so happened to hit at the exact same time that they were debating the possibility of self-identification in Scotland. And you remember, I mean, it was quite beautiful to see Nicola Sturgeon tying herself up in knots, trying to say that Isla Bryson, you know, was a rapist, not a woman. And, you know, but that point at what point did he stop becoming a woman?
Yeah.
You know, was the point at which he was accused or found guilty of rape, and you can't have it both ways, which was what Sturgeon was trying to do. You know, there is a part of me though thinks that you're absolutely right. You know, this is the logic of transgender ideology, but in a way, the very fact that we're having this discussion, which we must do, we must talk about this, but they've kind of won, because what we're all now talking about is the correct pronouns that these people should go by, whether they're male or female. What, you know, it becomes a distraction, if you like, from the actual offence that these men, the offences that these men have committed. The only thing really that we should be talking about in relation to Isla Bryson, I can't remember the male name.
Adam Graham.
Adam Graham, thank you, is the rape.
Yeah.
You know, that he should be being absolutely condemned as a rapist. Instead, the very fact that we have to get into these discussions about whether, you know, the correct way to address him is as Isla or Adam, as he or she, kind of hands a victory to these transgender ideologues, because we're not then associating these people with the gross acts they've committed.
Definitely. And Tom, anything else?
I think it's just another reminder of how the capture, as is often talked about, of various institutions has happened without, or has certainly preceded, any sort of formal legal change. I mean, the Isla Bryson scandal was so fascinating because of the fact that you had the Scottish government trying to bring in gender self-ID, and then this revelation that gender self-ID was already effectively rolled out across the Scottish prison service.
Yeah.
And in fact, even in English prisons, where this shift hadn't been made as explicit, there were horrendous cases of male sex offenders and rapists being put in the women's estate. Similarly with journalists, as you say, Joe, they're almost working under the misapprehension that they'll be prosecuted if they misgender someone, even a pervert who leaves adult nappies outside of nurseries. And yet that's obviously not the case. But what seems to have happened is that these activists managed to influence these institutions anyway. Or something which is even more chilling is that these institutions genuflect to this ideology, even if there's not an obvious point of contact between them and these activists. It's become so powerful, and the sense that to transgress against it is such an incredible sort of moral crime that they fall into line without anyone even really needing to bark orders at them.
Yeah.
And that's something which is going to be really difficult to tackle, because what you're trying to get is people to overcome that sense of cowardice and trying to dislodge the depressingly rightful sense that this ideology kind of rules the roost, at least in terms of elite institutions. So it's one of those things that makes it incredibly slippery, but also why it makes it all the more important to be on the front foot about it.
Absolutely. But if you can't do that pushback when we're talking about paedophiles, rapists, you know, when we're talking about children and women as victims of crimes, you know, it just shows the sheer scale of the task that's facing us.